Well, it's been a little while since I've made a YouTube video, so I thought I would jump on and do this short video impromptu about a recent project that I did for Oregon Public Broadcasting. It's a short documentary on a cartoonist named Homer Davenport who was active in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He was originally from the town of Silverton, Oregon, a small town just south of Portland a ways. Fascinating story about a young boy who grew up in that town and whose mother was a huge fan of the artist Thomas Nast, who was considered the father of the American cartoon, the godfather of the American cartoon, and was known for his illustration work during the Civil War. And it was published in a magazine, a popular magazine of the time called Harper's Weekly. The mother of Homer Davenport was a huge fan of this artist, and so when he was born, she felt that he could reach the great heights that Thomas Nast had as a cartoonist himself. And so her vision for her son was for him to be this great editorial cartoonist. And so when he was born, she immediately started cultivating his talents and encouraging him to draw. However, tragically, she contracted tuberculosis when he was 3 years old and became gravely ill. And on her deathbed, she had asked, or basically told her husband, she wanted him to raise little Homer Davenport as she had wished as a young artist. And so he did. Homer really had no formal training. He had self-taught himself. By about his mid-20s or his early 20s, he ended up going down to San Francisco and getting hired on to one of William Randolph Hearst's newspapers, the San Francisco Examiner. He was just recognized for his ability to make these incredible caricature drawings of the luminaries of the time, and so immediately became very sought after and popular as a political cartoonist ultimately. So I set out to do this short documentary to tell his story, and in a very short piece, like 6 minutes. Originally, the idea was to try to tell it in 3 to 5 minutes as a web-related video, but it turns out his story is very layered and has so many incredible twists and turns that the shortest I could pack it into was like about almost a little under 7 minutes. So the video itself was really a run and gun project. It was just myself, no crew. And so one of the initial challenges was just to figure out a methodology to produce the project with very minimal gear, because I was just going to be solo shooting and all of that, and I was going to be traveling from Portland to Silverton. I started out the shoot filming in Silverton, filming their annual Homer Days festival, which is a festival that they do every year that celebrates their favorite son, Homer Davenport, with a variety of events, music, food. They have a political cartoon contest that's open to, I think it's international. Big, very festive event. Everybody comes out. So I went out to film the parade, and then in that process discovered that there was a farm outside of Silverton, which was originally Homer Davenport's grandmother's, where he had done a drawing on the side of the house that was still there to this day. It was drawn in like the early 20th century. And so when I was wrapped up on the first day filming the parade, I decided to drive out to this farm and looked around and met the gentleman who runs it and is the trustee of the farm. And he showed me the drawing, and it was really incredible because it's this piece that is this lament that he had done as an adult when he had returned to his small hometown and had this kind of epiphanous moment about the view from the porch, and how it was the view that his grandmother had loved and that his mother had loved, and that he too found it to be the most sublime and beautiful place on earth. And this is a guy that had lived in New York, San Francisco, traveled to the Middle East, had been all over the world giving lectures. And the drawing itself is him on bended knee weeping. So it was a fascinating little glimpse into the inner heart and feeling of this man who had reached incredible heights and was really at the time considered the highest paid political cartoonist in the world. I mean, the guy was, he was having a pretty good life in that regard. So I basically asked the gentleman, Jim Toller, if I could come back and interview him. So we set up a date for me to return, and then also there was another gentleman by the name of Gus Frederick, who also is he's the president of the Silverton Country Historical Society, and he is also a Davenport historian and has reprinted a couple of Davenport's original books, but in annotated versions. A lot of his own personal research is in there, so we can kind of contextualize the work that at the time was understood, but now 100 years later, we need a little help knowing what the context of these particular cartoons were and are. So that's what I did. I came back and did a interview shoot, and the interesting thing about these, just on a technical level, was that we've got cars here. I'm in a rounder here, where the cars go around, so maybe you get some weird noise. But anyway, the interesting thing about these shoots, or the challenge that I gave myself, was to not bring any lights, just to shoot the interviews with all natural light, and therefore not have to lug around the stuff. And also these situations were such that they had to be done fairly quickly, kind of low profile. They're in spaces that some of them, was a publicly used space. So just wanted to make it go really quick, but also wanted them to be beautiful, nicely looking images. So the cool thing about the locations were there are these kind of older rustic, the old farmhouse where Homer Davenport's grandmother, her house, beautiful old country house. I noticed in the interior they had, there were a number of windows that had shears on them. So there was soft light coming in through the windows. So I basically positioned the subject next to the window to use as a far side key light, and shot it with a single camera, Sony FX3, then ran my Sennheiser boom mic directly into a Zoom F3 recorder, recording at 32-bit float to just have one less thing to track on in terms of audio levels, and achieved a really quite beautiful shot, for a shot that actually looks lit with all just natural light. And then did the same thing at the Silverton Historical Society, similar situation where it had a lot of rich dark wood in the interior, so it was a kind of moody, dark interior. But they also had a bank of windows with shears, so bringing in this nice soft light. So I just utilized that as, again, the far side key light on the subject, and did the interview that way. And so it was very minimal. I knew the interviews would be short, so I wasn't too worried about light shifting too radically in terms of just natural light and clouds. The choice to shoot single camera was also a way to keep the shoot simple, and I knew that I would be utilizing a lot of B-roll on top of the interviews. So the approach to shooting it actually worked out great. It was very simple, just was able to fit everything in one backpack, and I'm shooting on the DJI Osmo 3 right now, which I brought with me to shoot potentially behind the scenes stuff, but I ended up, not on the interview shoots, but on the day of filming the parade, I actually ended up starting with the FX3, but then realizing mobility-wise that the DJI Osmo 3 worked a lot better for capturing the parade because it was less invasive. It wasn't like some big camera, and I was able to actually get a bunch of really cool moves. It just moved a lot faster. So I used that, so the film itself has kind of a combo of the Osmo 3 and the FX3. In terms of post-production, I edited it in Premiere, and that's the primary program that Oregon Public Broadcasting uses for editing. However, when it came to coloring and audio mixing, I found that DaVinci gave me better, faster results in terms of being able to turn the project around with a decent mix and also being able to just dial in the color and also just using power windows to make specific shots look really nice, in particular the interviews. The idea was to create a piece that could come out right before the election, something that was in the realm of the realm of politics, but a little lighter note, because we know how intense this campaign is and what the stakes are, and so we thought, hey, let's just tell a story about politics 100 years ago and actually ask ourselves how much has changed and how much has stayed the same in terms of just the sheer bare knuckle quality of these competitions and how far people are willing to go to tear down their opponents. And Homer Davenport, he certainly was part of the mechanism, because at the time, people like William Randolph Hearst, the publisher of his paper, knew the power of cartoons and lampooning and characterizing the opponents in a very, very negative light. And so they utilized these drawings to really attempt to shift public opinion in one direction or another. So it was still pretty, it was hardcore back then, how they were running the political world. So in that regard, it doesn't seem like a lot has changed at all. Yeah, and so now it's out. And if you want to check it out, I'm going to put a link in the description below. So please take a look, see what you think, let me know, make a comment. And also hope that this video had a little bit of value to it. I know it's a little vloggy, a little rambly, but technically I wanted to give a little insight as to how I approached the project, and maybe that's helpful to you as well as you are approaching your projects if you're making films. And anyway, thanks for listening, and if this is dropping before the election, of course, don't forget to vote, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.